So, quite some time ago, when I made a video about Capcom's terrible showcasing at TGS, I received a comment on that channel that I thought was interesting, to say the least. Someone commented on the state of the Resident Evil franchise, and their stance basically was that the series has been not doing so well since Operation Raccoon City and in Resident Evil 6. They also mentioned Umbrella Corps. But then something out of the comment really drew my attention, which was the fact that Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 8 has made the series unrecognizable. Now, Resident Evil Village I'm not going to speak on because it's an unreleased game. Don't know what's going to happen with Resident Evil Village or how that game's going to turn out in the long run. Won't know that until the game actually officially releases next year, but with Resident Evil 7, I had to respond to that comment. I basically explained everything that Resident Evil 7 did as to why the game worked and why it was a success, because Resident Evil 7 I actually named to be in my top 10 video games that was released last decade, and I made a video on that at the beginning of the year. And Resident Evil 7 was on the list, and it was on the list for a good reason. But then, after I responded to that comment, I received another response from the same person, who claimed that Resident Evil 7 isn't a bad game, but it isn't a good Resident Evil game because it doesn't resemble anything about the series, anything that's come before. And this is where I had to call bullshit with this person right here. Because clearly they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. So that is why I'm making this video now. Consider this to be a deconstructive review of Resident Evil 7. Why Resident Evil 7 worked, why it was a success, and ultimately why it's one of the most important games in the entire series. Resident Evil 7, a game that was in development for quite some time after the release of Resident Evil 6, had a very different approach compared to anything that had came before in the series for years, for a very long time. With Resident Evil 6, Capcom made one of the worst games ever, one of the worst games of all time. Resident Evil 6 was a goddamn disaster. And the reason it was a disaster is because Capcom, for the longest time, and this began with Resident Evil 4. This is the curse of Resident Evil 4, which really is the double-edged sword of the series. Because while Resident Evil 4 was a highly revolutionary game, it didn't really do a whole lot for the series itself, because it led to two mediocre sequels. One mediocre sequel and one abysmally awful sequel with Resident Evil 6. And the problem with Resident Evil 6 is the fact that Capcom was trying to make a game that appealed to different audiences outside of survival horror. They wanted to appeal to fans of the stealth genre. They wanted to appeal to fans of the action genre. And they also wanted to appeal to fans of survival horror as well. And so their whole mentality with that game was, let's create 3 separate campaigns. And, you'll have one campaign for survival horror fans, one for action fans, one for stealth fans. Let's put some QTEs up in there, and it'll be a game for everyone, right? It'll be a win-win situation. Problem with that is that Resident Evil is not an action series, nor is it a stealth-based series. It is a survival horror series. Resident Evil fans, the core audience, including gaming journalists, and this is one of the only times I've seen gaming journalists actually fairly criticize a particular franchise. Everyone just about universally agreed that Resident Evil 6 was terrible. The reason for that is because it tried to appeal to everybody, but it quickly became a master of none situation. I actually remember when Resident Evil 6 was coming out, and Capcom actually released a demo for it on the Xbox Live Marketplace, and I believe PSN at the time for the PS3 and the 360. At the time, I played the demo at a friend's house, and I saw how bad it actually was, and how weak it was, how poorly designed it was. And so I didn't want to waste my time or my money on Resident Evil 6. It wasn't until several years later that I actually played through Resident Evil 6, and I bought the game on PlayStation 3 for $8, and I played through the entire thing, and I could not believe how bad it was. Like, everything about it was just awful. After Resident Evil 6, I was done. Like, I didn't want to support Resident Evil anymore. I didn't want to support Capcom anymore. And so when they announced this game, I had no interest in it at all. I remember they released a demo for Resident Evil 7, the videotape demo, and I played through it, and I was like confused. That's all that demo did for me. I didn't really understand what kind of game they were trying to make, and it didn't seem like Resident Evil to me at all. It was from a first person perspective. There were no weapons or, herbs or anything. I didn't understand what the vision of the game was, and so I had zero interest after Resident Evil 6 and after playing through the demo for Resident Evil 7. But then when the game actually came out, it officially released, it was getting this critical acclaim from these different gaming journalists. A bunch of different gaming publications were giving this game high scores, and I was trying to figure out, like, how is this game getting these scores? I don't understand, what's so good about it. And so I took a chance on it. I bought the game for full price, which is something I very rarely ever do. If I don't have an interest in a game, usually I don't spend my money on it. But I went ahead and paid for the game full price. I played through the entire thing, and I quickly discovered that this is actually the saving grace of the series. Resident Evil would be dead right now if it was not for Resident Evil 7. And the reason Resident Evil 7 works, well, there's a few different reasons why it works, but the main reason is that Capcom went back to the series' roots. They went back to what made the series great. Resident Evil 7 is a survival horror game through and through. It's not an action game. It's not a stealth-based game. There are stealth elements in it. There's some action elements in it, but it's primarily a survival horror game from start to finish. And so I'm going to break it down from the start of the game, what happens at the start of the game, all the way through to the end, and everything in between. All the little things that Capcom put into the game, as well as, the story and everything, to emphasize why this game was a success. So when Resident Evil 7 begins, we are greeted to a pre-recorded video of a woman talking to her significant other.
I cannot wait to be done with this babysitting job and come home to my loving husband. I miss you. Oh, I gotta get back to work. I love you, Ethan. I miss you so much. I'm sending tons of kisses. Bye, baby.
And what appears to be a normal exchange of a wife sending a loving message to her husband quickly devolves into a state of panic as the woman sends another video, basically giving a warning to her husband to not come and search for her.
I did lie to you. I shouldn't have. All I can say is that if you get this, stay away.
And then we are greeted with a slow opening where the husband has gone in search of his wife to basically try and find where she went missing in hope of finding where she is and bringing her back home.
What happened? I don't know. Look, I don't know how, but she's back. She's back somehow. Maybe it's a prank, but she wants me to come and get her. Where is she? Dulvey, Louisiana. Dude, it's been 3 years. I know, but what if it is her? I have to find out what happened. This is the place.
So the player is introduced to the character Ethan. This is a very different approach to the older Resident Evil games because it's from a first-person perspective. The great thing about the first-person perspective is that it puts you in the eyes of the character. The horror feels like a more personal experience compared to any other Resident Evil game that's come before, because you are living through Ethan's experience directly from his perspective. And so as Ethan pulls up into this outside Bayou area, he discovers a house that's locked. He can't get through the gate, and so he has to go around. He sees a glimpse of an elderly man walking by, but the man quickly disappears, and so he continues on his way. He finds his wife's driver's license and her purse just lying on the ground outside of this small house. He enters the house and starts looking around until he comes across a videotape.
Boo! Where did you find this guy? Give me a break, Pete. Hey, I only work with professionals. Speaking of which, make sure the sound is right this time. I don't want a repeat of Amarillo. That was 2 fucking years ago. I don't do ADR. This new guy? I'm not feeling it. Again? Just don't be surprised if we have to make a change. New plan. We do a walkthrough of the inside first, then we shoot the intro.
Just like we always do. Just try to say the show's name this time, okay?
No problem. Tonight on Sewer Gators, another worthless fucking shithole. Happy?
The three men, Peter, Clancy, and Andre, are from this series, this web series where they go around and explore haunted houses or haunted areas and film their experiences. And they came across the same house that Ethan arrives at the beginning of the game, which the footage on the tape from the cameraman Clancy shows that the three men were attacked by an unknown assailant, and they are presumed to be missing even though technically they were murdered inside this house. And so Ethan continues to search through the house until he finds his wife, who has been locked away inside a room, basically kept underground in the basement. Mia, upon reuniting with her husband, appears to be in a panicked state, and she doesn't claim to remember anything about what has happened to her in the house, which leaves Ethan with a lot of different questions.
But you did.
I didn't.
Okay, fine. Just tell me what's going on.
I'm telling you everything that I know. We have to go this way.
Upon further investigation with Mia in the basement, Ethan discovers a picture of a subject that has been given a number, a designation, of an old woman in a wheelchair. As he continues to search, there's a loud noise that goes off, and it appears that Mia has been taken.
No, leave me alone!
Mia?
Ethan heads upstairs from the basement back into the house until he hears a loud knocking at the basement door. When he goes to investigate, he finds Mia crawling up the stairs at him, and it appears that she's undergone some kind of transfiguration. She starts attacking him with a knife, and Ethan goes to defend himself when Mia proclaims that someone is inside her head, potentially controlling her actions, and she knocks herself out by banging her head against the wall.
I can hear her. I can feel way back inside of me. Get out! Leave me alone! I've been bad. I deserve this.
The fuck are you, Mia?
Mia regains consciousness and goes back into her altered state to continue attacking Ethan. And this fight continues when Ethan gains the upper hand and seemingly kills Mia by striking her in the neck with an axe. The phone in the hallway then rings. Ethan goes to answer, revealing that the person on the other end is a woman who appears to want to help Ethan escape the house.
Who's this? And what the fuck is going on?
My name's Zoe. There should be a way out through the attic.
Attic.
Go there. Now.
The woman Zoe instructs Ethan to go to the attic in order to escape the house. Ethan, on his way to the attic, runs into Mia again, who this time attacks him with the chainsaw, which causes Ethan to lose his hand.
See how you feel. It's my job. Must contain outbreak. Gonna quit. I promise. Must burn it all down.
Ethan collects his hand and goes to the attic, where Mia appears to be struggling with an internal battle inside of herself. When Ethan tries to leave the attic, Mia attacks him again. This time he's armed with a gun, and the couple engages in a fight to the death, in which Ethan once again comes out on top. With no choice but to leave Mia where she is, Ethan once again tries to leave the attic until he is knocked out by the same elderly man that he saw walking outside on his way to the house.
Welcome to the family, son.
When Ethan regains consciousness, he is greeted by a family, a husband, a wife, and a son, along with an elderly woman in a wheelchair. And the family appears to be unhinged.
Where's Mia?
Eat it. It's good.
Dumb some bitch wasn't no good if it hit him.
Yes.
Not again.
Get out the way, my boy. Let's do this.
Shit, he's not eating it, Jack! He's not eating
Shut
it!
the hell up, Marguerite.
Ain't that for him!
Get the hell out of here.
You're a son of a bitch! Oh, I can't believe it, you son of a bitch! He's not eating it! He's not eating it!
This was supposed to be a very special feast. My boy. God damn it. I'll bet it's that cop again. Goddamn pigs. I'm coming back for you.
The other members of the Baker family disperse from the table, with the exception of the old woman sitting in the wheelchair. Ethan finds a note that identifies the men that he watched in the video who went missing somewhere in Dolby, Louisiana. He narrowly runs into Jack Baker and is forced to hide from him while he tries to find some means of escape. He makes his way through a crawl space to the laundry room, where he receives another phone call from Zoe.
You did good, Ethan.
Zoe, right? And what the fuck are these?
Shut up and listen if you want to stay alive. You gotta get out of that house. There might be a way out through the main hall.
All right.
Oh, and that thing on your wrist is a codex. Don't lose it. It's important.
Ethan exits the laundry room when he discovers the police officer that the son of the family mentioned earlier. The officer has apparently been called over to the house multiple times. The officer clearly doesn't trust Ethan, but decides to give him a pocket knife. Ethan goes into the garage to meet the officer when Jack Baker takes a shovel and kills the officer.
Hey, we gotta get the fuck out of here.
Now, first, you need to tell me what you're doing out here alone in the middle of the night.
Me? What about you?
No, it's my job. Why don't you do your job and tell me? Answer my questions.
You're not gonna believe me if I told you.
Try me. Hey, put that door back. Put that door back up. Wait!
Ethan then fights off Jack Baker in the garage. This is where the greatness of Resident Evil 7 starts to shine through, because this is the first major boss encounter of the game. And as a boss encounter, Jack Baker is not restricted to a health bar on the screen, which gives the boss fights a familiar presence compared to all the older Resident Evil games. But what's more, Jack Baker in this encounter appears to have been designed to be reactionary. The character reacts based off of what the player is actually doing, versus the typical boss design of predetermined animations, which is what you find in most video games. As a result, the fight has a more realistic tone to it. One of the main issues with the middle trilogy for the mainline Resident Evil games, Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6, is that the villains were written to be a joke. They were either too over the top, to the point where you couldn't take them seriously, or they were just silly in general, to the point where every time they made their appearance on screen, the game was reminding you that this is a video game. And because it's a video game, there's no reason to be invested with the story. And the original Resident Evil games didn't have this issue. Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3 introduced villains that were compelling, made you want to care about the overall arcing story of the series itself. This is something that Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6 failed with, be it if you're talking about Resident Evil 4's Ramon Salazar.
Starting to wonder when you might notice us.
Who are you?
Me llamo Ramon Salazar, the 8th Castellan of this magnificent architecture. I have been honored with the prodigious power from the great Lord Sadler. I've been expecting you, my brethren.
No thanks, bro.
My, we've got a feisty one. If you care for your...
Series reoccurring villain Albert Wesker, who made his last appearance in Resident Evil 5.
This is Wesker.
We last met at the Spencer estate, wasn't it? Well, isn't this one big family reunion? I would expect you to be happier to see us.
Or Resident Evil 6's Derek Simmons.
Agent Birkin, impeccable timing. Kindly take these two into custody, won't you?
They said you were involved in the terrorist attack. Is it true?
What? Are they running down the street screaming it to anyone who'll listen?
Answer me!
It's for the benefit of the United States and global security.
Can't see how killing the president is good for the country!
The president's dead?
Well, we have Leon to thank for that.
God damn you, Simmons!
Dispose of them.
And not only did these characters fail to give players any reason to care about the nonsensical storyline that became Resident Evil's timeline, but gameplay-wise, you couldn't even take them seriously.
Found you! Poor performance, indeed.
One of the reasons the Baker family worked so well in Resident Evil 7 is because the characters are grounded. They're a lot more grounded than any villain from the series has been since Resident Evil 3. Nemesis in the original Resident Evil 3 was the last time there was really a compelling villain that's been in any of the games. All of the members of the Baker family are compelling within their own specific way. There are certain traits that are specific to each member of the family. For example, Jack Baker has regenerative capabilities. He's basically Wolverine from Marvel Comics. He possesses a healing factor which enables him to recover from any life-threatening injury. And that's what makes him terrifying as a villain.
Do I have your attention, boy? You're about to see something wonderful. Whoa. Fuck!
After Ethan defeats Jack Baker in the garage, he makes his way into the main house. And immediately, for anyone who is attentive, if you take a look at the actual main house, it resembles a lot of the Spencer mansion from the original Resident Evil. Not only does it resemble the Spencer Mansion, there's even an Easter egg that references the Arklay Mountains and a portrait hanging on the wall, which is where the Spencer Mansion was located.
Did my daddy give you a hard time?
That's your father?
He used to be.
I'm sorry, but he's dead now.
You just might be able to pull this off.
What? Pull what off?
There's something I need you to do, but I can't explain it right now. You may need some sort of keys to do it, but find a way out of the house.
Okay.
I'll be in touch.
After receiving another phone call from Zoe, Ethan is tasked with finding a way out of the house, but in order to do that, he has to find and use these 3 keys that will open the back door, which leads to the old house. And while exploring around upstairs, for anyone paying attention, Capcom left clues as to what the next level is actually going to be, as you can catch a glimpse of Marguerite Baker slowly walking on her way to the old house. And there's a videotape that Mia left behind, which will help Ethan on his journey in solving one of the game's first puzzles.
Ethan, if you find this, I know I can't expect anything from you. Not after what happened, after what I did. But I just want you to know that wasn't me. I don't know what happened. There's so much that you need to know.
There you are! You gave us quite a scare, young lady.
I can't let her catch me again.
I don't get it. Stay right there, you little bitch! You've been a bad girl!
No, don't come over here.
am through playing games with you! You hear me? You hear me? You hear me? Ah! Ethan, please help me. Ethan, help me.
As Ethan continues searching through the house for the 3 keys that he needs in order to get through the back door, which leads to the guest house, he finds a picture of a little girl in one of the dressers upstairs. He also notices that the old woman sitting in the wheelchair from when he met the Baker family just so happens to be just sitting there watching his every move. This is very, very important to understanding this game's story, because this is not the first time that this happens.
Who builds this shit?
This is one of the most important moments in the entire game. It's where you first encounter the molded creatures. Which act as the game's standard enemies, outside of the Baker family, which are the boss characters. What makes the Molded unique from all of the other monsters that have appeared in past Resident Evil games is the fact that they can literally be anywhere, and they can appear from any space, no matter how small. They are basically living fungi, organisms that can attach themselves to anything and take control. They are basically living parasites, and that's what makes them terrifying. Gameplay-wise, the Molded are very telegraphed in their animations, so you as the player always know when you're supposed to duck, or when you're supposed to back away, or when you're supposed to block. And blocking is actually one of the best mechanics that has been introduced in Resident Evil 7, which was not even possible in the older Resident Evil games. These are some of the reasons why the Molded are a great addition to the series. They also play an important role to the game's primary antagonist, who is ultimately responsible for creating the Molded in the first place. After forging ahead through the basement, Ethan finds one of the keys that he needs to unlock the back door, when he runs into Jack Baker, and this initiates the second major boss fight of the game, not counting the small encounter with Mia at the beginning. This fight, similar to the other bosses in the game, plays to Resident Evil 7's strength. Going into this fight with fresh eyes for someone who hasn't played this game before, you're going to be a bit confused as to what you're supposed to actually do. But for a veteran player, Capcom put a specific design in place in order to make the fight a breeze, and that is the pillar at the center of the room. Using the pillar, the player can take cover away from Jack Baker as he finishes his attack animation, and then you can go in and strike with the chainsaw. And you basically rinse and repeat this process until Jack Baker destroys the pillar, and even then you still have the hanging bodies in the room that you can use to kick into Jack Baker, which will stun him, preventing him from attacking, which allows the player to regroup. After defeating Jack Baker, Ethan acquires the Scorpion Key, and as he makes his way back to the living room, he once again runs into the old woman sitting in her wheelchair staring at him, just the same as she was before. Ethan goes through the back door and continues on his way towards the old house, which is where Marguerite Baker has taken Mia captive. Ethan enters into the trailer that's sitting in the backyard of the main house, and he finds belongings as well as a note that belongs to someone unknown, specifically a woman, possibly the same woman he's been speaking to periodically over the phone. He receives another phone call from Zoe, who informs him,
You made it. You're the first I've ever seen make it this far.
So what is it you need me to do? Is it gonna help me get out of here?
Yes. Now listen carefully, Ethan. My family and our bodies are contaminated. I can't leave the property unless I get it out. And the same goes for Mia.
Is there a way to get it out?
We need the serum. It should clear whatever this stuff is out of the body, as long as you're not too far gone.
Alright, so where is it?
If I knew where one was, I'd already be long gone. But I have a feeling my mother has hidden some inside the old house somewhere.
So if we get this thing, I can help Mia and we can get out of here?
Right. And so can I. The old house is near the water. You can't miss it.
Alright.
I just hope you can handle my mother.
Your mother?
Be careful. They'll be looking for you.
Using the path that leads to the old house, Ethan has to fight his way through the old house, which is full of insect hives that have been laid by Marguerite. And this also establishes a change in the presentation of horror, which went from a stalker slasher with Jack Baker to a nest full of mutated enlarged insects.
Stay the fuck out!
This is also the point in the game where you receive your first upgrade for your inventory slots, which is another nice callback to the older Resident Evil games. After avoiding Marguerite and her bugs, Ethan finds the first part of the catalyst needed to conduct the cure that will permanently prevent him, Zoe, and Mia from being able to become infected.
Well, did he find a serum?
I just got done dealing with your mom and her fucking bugs. Wish you could have warned me.
Sorry about that. What about the serum?
I haven't found any, but I did find out we need to make one. A D-series head and an arm. This can't be right.
A head? I think I have that around here somewhere.
You do?
I don't know about the arm, though. Have you searched the whole house?
No, not yet. I still need to check the second floor here.
All right. Check it out. Meet me at the trailer if you find it.
I told you to stay out of here!
After a brief scuffle with Marguerite while being stuck in a pit, Ethan gains the upper hand and Marguerite is knocked into the pit, only to subsequently undergo some kind of grotesque transformation. Ethan chases after Marguerite all the way to the greenhouse, where they engage in a fight to the death. The boss fight with Marguerite Baker is one of the most intense encounters in Resident Evil 7. It forces the player to be completely alert of their environment at all times, because Marguerite will often flee away from Ethan so she can lay a hive somewhere in the environment. While it may not be the best designed fight in the game, it does force the player to pay attention to what's actually happening on screen and be completely alert.
Fucking stay dead, okay?
After killing Marguerite, Ethan returns to the old house where he goes through a secret passageway that's infested with molded, where he acquires the catalyst arm that's needed to concoct the cure for all three, him, Mia, and Zoe. It's at this point during the game that Ethan sees a first brief glimpse of the little girl Evelyn, who is seemingly haunting him, following his every move.
Did you find it?
Yeah, I got it. Are we really gonna be able to make serum with this thing?
It'll be fine. After we make it, we can get out of here. Together. I'll be waiting for you in the trailer.
Alright.
As Zoe instructed, Ethan returns back to the trailer to find her missing, and instead receives a head of one of the molded creatures in the refrigerator with a message from the son of the family, Lucas, telling him to go to the dissection room in the basement. In the dissection room, Ethan finds a note from Lucas to reach down the throat of the dead police officer from earlier in the game so that he can acquire the snake key used to get through specific locked doors in the main house.
Sorry, buddy.
That pretty little thing will help you find the two key cards that you're gonna need to join the party we're having over here. You've gotta earn your way, Ethan.
As Ethan makes his way back upstairs, he goes through the first locked door with the snake key requirement in order to enter, and he finds the old woman sitting there, once again, watching his every move. Entering a specific time on the clock, which opens a secret passageway leading back downstairs to the basement, Ethan finds the first of the 2 keycards that Lucas told him to acquire in order to gain access into the boathouse. Ethan once again returns upstairs, where he once again uses the snake key to enter into Lucas's room. There he finds a secret activation key which leads to the attic, and he finds the other keycard that he needs to enter into the boathouse there.
Hey, buddy. Remember, those 2 key cards will get you into the party. Don't be late now.
Let me talk to Mia.
No! You gotta show up first. You haven't forgotten where the party is, have you? You can get in from the courtyard. So come on, man. Everybody's waiting for you.
Ethan, hold on. I got some for you. Looky what I've got. You know what this is for? You know what Zoe wants to do with this? Ethan, you can crawl around underneath that filthy, rotten house all you want looking for them ingredients, but you ain't gonna find a goddamn thing, Ethan. You'll need that serum? Ooh, baby. You're gonna have to come through me. You hear? Now come on, Ethan. What do you say?
Fuck!
Ethan returns outside and enters into the boathouse. And here we see another change in the style of horror. With Jack Baker, it was more of a slasher thriller. With Marguerite Baker, the game played around with insect horror. With Lucas Baker, this is more or less Capcom's version of the Saw movies, where you have an evil genius, similar to Jigsaw, that's using traps in order to kill his victims. When Ethan goes to watch the videotape Happy Birthday, which showcases Clancy, the cameraman from the start of the game, trying to escape one of Lucas's traps, Clancy, during the last few minutes of his life, shows exactly what he did wrong, which subsequently allows Ethan to complete the puzzle and outsmart Lucas, who later flees once he fails to kill Ethan. And Lucas is not seen again until one of the game's DLC episodes, the Not a Hero DLC with Chris Redfield, which takes place after the events of the main game. After discovering where Zoe and Mia have been held captive by Lucas, Ethan frees Zoe and gives her the 2 catalysts needed to make the cure, when he is attacked by a mutated Jack Baker, who once again survived their encounter in the basement of the main house.
Zoe, get your ass back to the house. I will deal with you later.
Ethan fights off Jack Baker in another fight to the death, destroying his multiple weak points in the form of eyes around his body, which has now further mutated and largely taken over by the black mold. In order to stop Jack, Zoe gives Ethan one of the serums needed to cure the virus, and Ethan stabs Jack with the serum, causing a negative reaction to take place in his body.
Are you all right?
Yeah.
Come on. Mia's waiting for us.
Ethan is then given a choice to either use the remaining serum on Zoe or to use it on Mia. While the player has a choice, in choosing Zoe, the end of Zoe DLC confirms that the canon storyline is that Ethan used the serum on Mia, which makes more sense because the whole point of the game is so Ethan can find his wife and bring her back home. The man clearly loves his wife.
Both of you just go! Come with us. I'm sure there's someone who can help.
This is not home. Apparently I belong here.
I'll send help.
Don't bother. There won't be anyone left to help!
After Ethan declares to Zoe that he will send help for her, once he and Mia get to safety, away from the Baker family's plantation, Ethan and Mia are soon attacked, yet again.
Ethan? Thank you.
Who the hell else was I gonna choose?
Ethan.
Mia, I know you've been through a lot. We need to talk. You had something to do with all this, didn't you? Look, I just want to know the truth.
Ethan, I honestly don't remember.
Try. Is that the boat? How the fuck did that get here? Oh, you're okay.
What the fuck? What is that? What is that?
After being washed ashore, Mia awakens and finds Ethan incapacitated, where he is taken by mold. Mia is forced to enter the ship's wreckage in order to find her husband. This is great because it reverses the roles of these characters, which, for the entire game, it has been Ethan trying to find his wife. Now, it's his wife who has to save his life.
Ethan? Ethan! No! Ethan! Ethan!
And this role change plays to the game's strength very efficiently. While scouring the ship, Mia encounters flashbacks, and she starts to remember the events that led to the ship's crash, which is all due to a little girl named Evelyn.
Settle down, little girl. Settle
Are you remembering?
What? What are you?
You said we could be a family.
What are you talking about?
You said!
Wait!
I'm tired of waiting.
Being trapped on the first floor with an array of molded creatures, Mia has to find her way upstairs so she can continue her search for Ethan. This leads her to a room upstairs, where she encounters Evelyn again, and the player is thrust into this important flashback, which basically explains Mia's backstory, and how she was discovered by the Bakers in the first place.
You need to remember, so we can be a family.
The designation at the beginning of this videotape, being test subject E-001, is the same designation found on the back of the photo from the very beginning of the game.
I remember this room. There's another door here. I'm sure of it. It's not here.
So whoever test subject E-001 is, that's who's really to blame for the crash of the ship, and potentially a lot more.
She must have infected me during the attack. And I'm too far gone anyway. But it serves me right. It's my fault she got out.
Yeah, it is your fault. But that doesn't mean I'm gonna let you die.
She didn't attack you?
It's part of her imprinting protocol. I can't believe this is happening.
Here, take it. It has her tissue samples. You find her. You fix this.
Okay, Evie, where are you?
This note confirms that Mia had a secret job that she was probably keeping from her husband, Ethan, in which she worked for a covert organization known as the Connections. And the Connections are responsible for creating Evelyn. Mia's job on the ship was to help transport Evelyn to a secure facility, but Evelyn escaped when she was on the ship and she had to track her down, which is what the player sees in the flashback. Evelyn not only escaped on the ship, she started to attack the crew members on the ship and turn them into molded, which is why the ship is infested with molded when Mia and Ethan arrive at the ship ruins late in the game. Now this may raise some confusion because of the old woman in the wheelchair. If Evelyn, the little girl, is subject E-001 and the old woman in the wheelchair is subject E-001, then that means they are one and the same. That means that the old woman in the wheelchair is Evelyn. But how and why is Evelyn an old woman whose muscles have deteriorated so much and her age progressed so quickly end up in a wheelchair in the game? And why does she sometimes appear as a 10-year-old girl? That's also explained closer to the end of the game.
How did you get here?
Where's Evie?
She's out of control. Without the treatments, she's deteriorating.
Well, it's a good thing, Marty.
How did you get here?
Where's Evie?
She's out of control. Without the treatments, she's deteriorating.
Well, it's a good thing, Marty.
That one small line of dialogue from Mia, which is very important and easy to miss, basically explains why Evelyn appears as an old woman throughout the game, and sometimes appears as a little girl. Evelyn was on some type of medication before the events of the game, and when she was discovered by the Baker family in the daughter's DLC, she didn't have her medicine, and as a result, her body rapidly aged, her muscles deteriorated, leaving her strapped to the wheelchair indefinitely. But then there's another question that arises from this. Who or what is Evelyn, and why does she randomly appear here and there throughout the game when you're playing as Ethan?
Ethan. You were right. I did lie to you. I shouldn't have. All I can say is that if you get this, stay away. Forget that you ever knew me. Have a good life.
We'll be together forever. Now do you remember?
Yes, Evelyn. I remember.
Can we be a family like before?
No, Evie. We can't be a family. We were never a family. We will never be a family.
Then I don't need you anymore.
After the flashback is over, Mia continues to search the ship for Ethan until she finds him trapped in Evelyn's mold.
I need you to do something.
Ethan.
Ethan then has some kind of out-of-body experience when he sees a vision of the Baker family, who basically apologizes to him for their actions throughout the game, and furthermore explain that they were being controlled by Evelyn. But the question remains, if the Baker family were just victims of Evelyn, and Evelyn is the real threat as the game's primary antagonist, then why would Evelyn even want to control the Baker family in the first place? Technically, at this point in the game has already answered that question, but I'll go back to that.
She infected us with her gift. That's what she calls it. I found her near a busted out tanker in the bayou. Everything changed after that.
So she infects you and then she takes control?
No. Not exactly, son. She just... She forces her way into your mind, your soul. You can't fight back. You are connected to her, and you can't resist the urge to... Oh, you're a different person after that.
Just like Mia. So Mia sent me that message because of Evelyn.
Listen, the girl just wants a family of her own. She's the key, all right? You find her, and you stop her. Ethan, free my family. Please.
Don't you dare.
For what? You're not my mommy. Remember?
Mia, how?
There's no time. You have to get out of here and find her. Here, take this.
What? Wait, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Saving your life. You need to go. I won't be able to resist for much longer.
No.
Now go kill that little bitch.
No. Mia! No! Okay, you little bitch. Where the fuck are you?
Ethan at this point in the game only has one goal, and that is to find Evelyn and kill her. He makes his way over to the mines, somewhere close by the Baker plantation, and he fights his way through a legion of molded, until he arrives at a lab.
Alpha 1, this is Bravo 1. Do you read?
This is Alpha 1. Report. Did you find anything?
A thorough search of the Baker property revealed 0 survivors. Repeat, 0 survivors. We did find evidence of a skirmish.
Evelyn?
Negative. However, we did find several encrypted messages from the baker's son Lucas to an unknown third party. You can probably guess who that was.
That's just great. We've had reports he's in the abandoned mine south of the property. I'm gonna go have a look.
Roger that. We'll meet you at those coordinates.
If you encounter Evelyn, orders are shoot to kill. Repeat, shoot to kill.
This one specific room is the most important room in the entire game because it explains the virus, what it is, how it works, and it also explains what Evelyn is, where she came from, and what her ultimate goal is throughout the game. This particular note explains what Evelyn's goal is throughout the game, and it also explains what Evelyn is. Evelyn, also known as Subject E-001, is a bioweapon that was created by the Connections, and the note mentions that she has some type of family obsession. Particularly, she's obsessed with Mia, and this is why Mia is the only person who survived the Baker family for as long as she did, is because Evelyn wouldn't allow anything to happen to her, because she was under the presumption that Mia is her mother. But was this obsession with family programmed into her, or was it something that she developed on her own? This note is important because it explains how the E-Series virus works and what it actually does to the victim once it enters the body. Mold is a form of bacteria that attaches itself inside the subject's body and takes nutrients from the subject's body in order to help itself grow. And eventually it starts to take over the body. And the result is that the victim will start to gain remarkable healing capabilities, which is why Lucas was able to regrow his arm after Jack had cut it off during the introduction scene earlier in the game with the Baker family. It also explains that the subject will start to mutate, and that each case differs from person to person. And this explains why the members of the Baker family were able to evolve and transform into something that's inhuman. It also explains that the victim will start to experience hallucinations, see things that aren't there, and they'll start to share thoughts with the E-Series asset, in this case, Evelyn. And this is how Evelyn was able to control the Baker family, as the note from Marguerite explained earlier in the game. These test pictures that Ethan comes across shows what happens to E-Series virus inhabitants when they are injected with the E-necrotoxin, which is the serum that destroys the E-Series virus. This little note explains how the E-necrotoxin works and what it actually does once it enters the body, which is that it destroys the cells of the subject. So the E-necrotoxin was not created to just simply destroy the virus. It was created to destroy both the virus and the subject itself. Meaning that if Ethan injects Evelyn with this, the serum will kill her. This is one of the most important notes in the entire game. The first 2 pages of this explain the origins of the E-Series virus and the fact that the whole point was to create a bioweapon that had minimal contact and that could also turn enemies into allies, basically effectively removing the need for combat altogether. That was the whole point of the E-Series project. It also explains that the fungus, also known as mutamycete, was inserted into a pre-stage 4 human embryo and was cultivated in a controlled environment over a period of 38 to 40 weeks, and that there were candidate specimens for the project. And this leads back to Evelyn. The note goes on to explain that a common appearance was selected for the bioweapons, which is that of a 10-year-old girl. And the point of that was so the subject could blend in with urban and refugee populations, and basically make it easier to gain an enemy's trust. It also explains that Evelyn's mutamycetes, or her fungus, or her mold, has a profound control over the body and mind, in that it starts with hallucination, and then evolves further to where the victim starts to see images of her. And these images of Evelyn are an entity known as Phantom Evelyn. And this process continues until the victim's natural barriers in their mind is fully broken and Evelyn has achieved full control. So after reading that note, it becomes immediately clear why Evelyn sometimes appeared as a little girl and why she appeared as an older woman earlier in the game. And it also explains why Evelyn would sometimes appear when the player is playing as Ethan. What was really going on is that Evelyn was projecting hallucinations of her younger self, as well as creating Molded in an orchestrated attempt to try and kill Ethan. So realistically, she was following him around throughout the entire game.
Are you remembering?
What? What are you?
We'll be together forever.
The final note of the game mentions that Evelyn is able to create superorganisms known as Molded that have a very strong survival instinct and have a remarkable toughness due to their fungal body. The second part also mentions the serum, which is the E-necrotoxin, which once again was created to not be a cure for the subject, but rather to dispose of the subject entirely. It was meant to be fatal to the subject. The third part mentions Evelyn's obsession with family, with most of her infected victims being treated as her mother or father. Now, it's speculated that the reason Evelyn is so obsessed with the concept of family is that she instinctively knew that a family unit is better suited to blend into social groups than a simple young child on their own. But it's also speculated that the reason for this is because of her quarantined upbringing and the fact that she grew up without a mother and father. Either way, Ethan exits the lab and he continues on his way to the Baker family guest house, where he hopes to find Evelyn and finally put an end to her once and for all. After fighting his way through more Molded, Ethan arrives at the guest house and encounters Evelyn once more. But the Evelyn that he encounters is Phantom Evelyn, which is the 10-year-old girl. He has to find Old Evelyn, which is the real person, and inject her with the E-necrotoxin, which will finally kill her. Evelyn attempts to conjure a phantom version of Mia from the beginning of the game, but given that it's a hallucination, it's not something that can physically actually harm Ethan.
You shouldn't have done that! It fucking hurts!
Does it want to be my daddy? Then he can die. Now it's Mommy's turn to kill you. You'll play nicely.
I'm not playing.
No! Get that away from me!
Don't need your pity.
Get away! No, don't!
Ethan finally finds Evelyn upstairs in the attic of the guest house, where a showdown takes place. He injects her with the necrotoxin, which dissolves Evelyn's body and turns her into a raging monster.
Away from me! Stop! 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 No! 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 No!
You.
Why does everyone hate me?
It hurts! It hurts! It hurts! Damn you! Damn you all to hell!
As a final boss, this is the closest that Resident Evil 7 gets to being remotely comparable to the older games, in terms of Resident Evil 7's comparison to Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6, all three of which had gigantic boss fights similar to this. In their battle, Evelyn nearly kills Ethan, until Ethan receives some assistance from operatives riding in a helicopter above. They drop him a gun that's filled with the necrotoxin, and he fires multiple times at Evelyn, finally putting her down. Ethan is then reunited with Mia, and the couple are escorted to safety by Blue Umbrella. The team that found them is being led by Chris Redfield, who now has to track down Lucas Baker, who has fled into the mines. And this takes place during one of the game's DLC episodes, Not a Hero.
I'm Redfield. I'm glad we found you.
The fuck took you guys so long?
Ethan?
Mia. You made it. I'm glad.
Did I?
They say that when one door closes, another opens. Well, a door closed tonight. And what a long night it was. But not just for me. Me and I weren't the only victims here. So were the Bakers. It was that thing, Evelyn, who made them that way. But now Evelyn's dead. And these guys are here to clean up the mess. I had just come to terms with losing Mia. But now she's back and wants to start over. Put all this behind us.
From that point, the game leads into the credits sequence, which plays the game's theme song, Go Tell Aunt Rhody. And Go Tell Aunt Rhody is very important to understanding the main theme of Resident Evil 7. Upon first glance at the song Go Tell Aunt Rhody, or at least a modified version of it, given the fact that it's the main theme of Resident Evil 7, one could assume that it's just a random song and it's just meant to help promote the game and there's not much of a purpose behind it. That is until you actually take a look at the lyrics. And there's two main verses in the song. If we take a look at the first verse here, now I would just play the song and just comment on it that way, but I don't feel like getting a copyright strike on this video, so I'm not going to do that. So instead, I've pulled up the song here on lyricstranslate.com. This is the first verse right here, these 4 lines. You take a look at those 4 lines. It reads, I was raised in a deep dark hole, a prisoner with no parole. They locked me up and took my soul, ashamed of what they made. Now those lyrics are important because they are from the perspective of Evelyn. Those 4 lines are about Evelyn and her backstory in the game. But there's more. The second verse, which reads, I called to him and he will come. She'll answer him like he's the one, his arms outstretched, but when she's done, he'll be torn apart. And those lyrics are from the perspective of Mia under the control of Evelyn. Specific words such as him and he and his and he'll, those words are in reference to Ethan, whereas words like she'll and she's in reference to Evelyn. So the song narrates quite a bit of what happens in the game without giving away the entire story. But the whole point of the song is to reflect the main theme of Resident Evil 7. But what is the main theme of Resident Evil 7?
My family and I.
You said we could be a family.
What are you talking about?
You said!
Welcome to the family, son.
Can we be a family like before?
No, Evie. We can't be a family. We were never a family. We will never be a family.
So the main theme of Resident Evil 7 is family. This is emphasized by the fact that the concept of the game revolves around a husband who is in search for his missing wife. That is literally what the entire game is about. Evelyn's entire motivation, including why she decided to brainwash the Baker family, also including all of the Baker family's victims, as well as no harm coming to Mia in the 3 years before Ethan arrives, and Ethan being called over to the Baker plantation in the first place. All of these things emphasize the whole central theme of family. And because Resident Evil 7 has a central theme, and it doesn't deviate from that theme, but rather focuses intensely on that theme throughout the game's runtime from start to finish, that makes it a far more focused game than any of the past Resident Evil games that's come before it. The game has an artistic vision that was completely missing with Resident Evil 5 and 6, which were just simple corporate products, but lacked any sort of consistent artistic vision to make those games successful. Every little detail that was put into this game was to emphasize the story, which is the main focus point of the game. Everything, even the game's cover art, which has a silhouette of Evelyn on the cover. When was the last time a video game publisher was bold enough to put the final boss of the game directly on the cover art? I can't think of a single video game that's done anything like that, because it's simply unheard of. The vast majority of video game cover arts features only the protagonist, but the publisher will completely disregard putting the antagonist up on the cover art, in fear that will give away the game's entire plot. But Resident Evil 7 was bold enough to go there, and so the game can be appreciated on a more artistic level than most other video games. The attention to detail, the well-written narrative, the likable characters, the interesting villain with Evelyn, all of these things are what makes Resident Evil 7 one of the best video games that Capcom has ever produced. But the important role of Resident Evil 7 in the Resident Evil series is that it pulled the series from the brink of collapse. Resident Evil 6 may have sold very well, but it was a critical flop, and it single-handedly forced Capcom to put the series on hiatus. Resident Evil 7 was successful, for one, because it got rid of all of the complicated storylines that the series had been throwing around for the past several years, resulting in the messy plot that became Resident Evil 6. For two, it removed all the action elements that became prevalent with Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6. For three, the game brought back many gameplay elements and tropes that was synonymous with the first 3 Resident Evil games in the series, RE1, 2, and 3, and bringing back the Metroidvania-style level design, as well as the save houses, the weapon upgrades, the puzzles, and progressional environmental design. And it did all this while providing the player with a new perspective, by making the game first person, which really plays to the game's favor. Behind Resident Evil 4, and Resident Evil 2, I'd argue that Resident Evil 7 is the third best game in the entire series. Because without it, there would be no Resident Evil. Resident Evil would not be around right now if it wasn't for Resident Evil 7. If Resident Evil 7 turned out to be a bad game, and it turned out to be a waste of time, and it turned out to be a financial and critical flop, Resident Evil would have died. That would have been it. That would have been the final nail in the coffin. But the critical reception of Resident Evil 6 forced Capcom to go back to the drawing board and actually actively think about what type of game would have been the right direction for the series to go in. And they couldn't have came up with anything better than Resident Evil 7. And not only is the main game fantastic, but the game's post-launch content with the DLC episodes were also fantastic because, for one, they remixed the gameplay just enough to where they felt like their own unique experience, but they also added to the plot of Resident Evil 7 by giving characters like Zoe and Lucas a much more definitive send-off. Therefore, when I read a comment from someone who is saying Resident Evil 7 wasn't a good game, or Resident Evil 7 wasn't a true Resident Evil game, or Resident Evil 7, they didn't like Resident Evil 7 because of the first-person perspective, or something else stupid like Resident Evil 7 is more of an Outlast game than it is a Resident Evil game, I have to dismiss it as pure ignorance. Because clearly anyone who says that didn't really understand this game, and they don't understand the importance that this game has within the series. Resident Evil 7 is the game that saved Resident Evil, and that's why it's great. Among many other things that I discussed earlier in the video, but that's the main reason why the game works so well. And it's also the reason why I'm very much looking forward to Resident Evil Village. I'm very curious to see what Capcom's going to do with that. And so that is the end of my deconstructive review for Resident Evil 7, and I hope that Resident Evil Village continues the upwards trajectory that began with this game.
You didn't forget about me.
I told you I'd send help, and I always keep my promises.
Thank you, Ethan.